Something is happening right now, and it's not just contained to one region. In just the last few days, we saw the largest wave of strikes since the war began. There are threats of total obliteration and warnings that entire infrastructures could collapse. But while the world is watching one region burn, another is quietly preparing. Military positioning, new weapons systems, global alliances shifting. This is not just about escalation. This is about alignment.
Right now, the pace of this conflict is accelerating. In just 48 hours, officials confirmed that this marks the highest volume of strikes since the war began. Not a slowdown, not a pause, an escalation. And not just in action, but in language. Because alongside these strikes, we are hearing warnings that go far beyond anything we've heard before. Threats of complete obliteration, talk of collapsing infrastructure, even the possibility of ground troops now being openly discussed. This is no longer a contained conflict. This is a moment where the ceiling is being raised. At the same time, missile activity continues. Strikes hitting industrial zones, critical infrastructure being targeted, and systems being repaired within hours just to be used again. That alone should tell us something. This is not a temporary engagement. This is sustained capability on both sides. Newsmax is reporting that using U.S. ground troops in Iran will be on the table if they do not reach a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And this is according to President Trump on Sunday. Trump told The Hill that no infrastructure targets would be off the table if the United States and Iran do not reach a deal. He posted a cryptic Truth Social message on Sunday stating Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. 7 Israel National News is reporting that Israel's Defense Minister Katz said that we'll collapse Iran's national infrastructure. He stated this on Sunday morning. He also said, I commend our American partners for the safe rescue of the U.S. aircrew. This is another expression of the close cooperation between Israel and the U.S., even in the most complex moments. Tonight, the president brushed off fears that the attacks on Iran could be classified as a war crime. He said he's not worried about it. You know, the war crime is allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Asked again about the issue, he said that Iran's leaders were animals who have taken tens of thousands of lives of protesters. According to the president, if Iran fails to make a deal, their bridges and power plants will be dropping all over their country. He said if they don't make a deal and fast, I'm considering blowing everything up and taking over the oil. In the meantime, Iranian state media filmed dozens of civilians forming a human chain in front of one of the country's power plants on Tuesday. Iranian officials had called on civilians to help protect energy infrastructure amid President Trump's threats of targeting it. The State Department in Bahrain has instructed all American citizens to shelter in place. Fox News is reporting that Iran has threatened to take action if President Trump follows through on his threats to use military force against civilian targets if Iran fails to come to the table. They also rejected a temporary ceasefire proposal, particularly in light of the June experience when hostiles resumed under false pretext. A ceasefire in this context serves only to disarm and prepare for the continuation of further crimes. A UN envoy tasked with helping solving the strait is on his way to Iran to continue consultations with mediators, signaling renewed diplomatic activity despite ongoing tensions. Meanwhile, it's also been reported that the White House has responded to reports that Iran has cut off direct negotiations with the U.S. ahead of President Trump's 8 p.m. deadline. The Wall Street Journal first reported the supposed breakdown in talks, and the White House declined to confirm or deny the status of negotiations. The press secretary stated that the Iranian regime has until 8 p.m. Eastern Time to meet the moment and make a deal with the United States. Only the president knows where things stand and what he will do. Now, as I mentioned in the past, Russia and China have been helping Iran. According to Fox News, Russia has provided Iran with a list of 55 critical energy infrastructure targets within Israel. The list, which the Jerusalem Post obtained from a source close to the Ukrainian intelligence, targeted sites based on 3 categories according to their strategic importance: critical production facilities, urban and industrial energy hubs, and local infrastructure. Russia reportedly told Iran that damaging even a few central components could trigger prolonged energy collapse, which could result in mass blackouts and technical failures. And what is China doing? Well, as the war in Iran erupted 5 weeks ago, social media sleuths across Western and Chinese platforms flagged a wave of viral posts detailing equipment at U.S. bases, the movements of American carrier groups, and granular breakdowns of how military aircraft were assembling for strikes on Iran. The intelligence came from a fast-growing new market, Chinese firms, some with links to the People's Liberation Army, marrying artificial intelligence with open source data to market information that they claim can expose the movements of U.S. forces. Beijing has sought to distance itself from any direct involvement in the Iranian war, but the firms, many of which have emerged in the past 5 years as part of the government's push to harness private AI for military use, are capitalizing on the conflict. Now, it's also being reported by Fox News that China could target U.S. homeland if the Iranian conflict escalates. This is according to an expert. Unidentified, sophisticated drones flying over a handful of U.S. military bases could be a warning sign from China, according to Gordon Chang. He said that the important point here is what we had last month. Over 4 of our important military bases were foreign drones. These drones were large. They were unhackable. They were obviously not recreational, so some foreign power, probably China, maybe Russia, was operating drones over our critical Air Force bases. He went on to say that really right now the United States needs to be able to defend its bases in the homeland because those drone flights were a warning to the United States of some sort. Chang suggested that the drone activity could be an attempt to send President Trump the message that if U.S. forces escalate in the region, China could respond by potentially targeting bases on American soil. That warning, coupled with a recent suspicious device that was left near MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, which Chang suggested may have been linked to China. He warned that we really got to be concerned. These are warnings that China intends to move on the U.S. in the American homeland. He also warned that Beijing's actions could be viewed in the context of its growing alignment with other U.S. adversaries like Russia and Iran. Generally speaking, he finally stated that the United States now faces a very powerful combination, and we shouldn't be doing anything that fuels that combination.
But here's what makes this even more significant. While all of this is unfolding in one region, something else is happening in another. Not explosions, not headlines dominating the news cycle, but movement, positioning, preparation. Because in the Indo-Pacific, we are seeing an entirely different type of escalation.
In just the last few days, China has made a move that raised serious attention, reserving massive sections of offshore airspace, not for hours, not for days, but for weeks. This is not standard. This signals something more sustained, a posture that is being held, not tested. At the same time, Japan has stepped into new territory, deploying long-range missiles capable of reaching far beyond its borders. This marks a clear shift from defense to response capability. And when nations begin preparing for response, it tells you that they are thinking ahead, not just about protection, but about conflict scenarios. Meanwhile, pressure around Taiwan continues, not fading, not slowing, but becoming more refined, more strategic. And all of this is happening under one key condition: timing, because global attention is divided right now. And when focus is pulled in one direction, it can create opportunity in another. That is what regional leaders are watching. And that is why alignment is happening now. Because this is not about one headline. It's about positioning across multiple regions at the same time. And history shows us it's not always the loudest moment that changes everything. It's the buildup, the quiet movement before the shift. Which brings us to Germany. Last week, for the first time in decades, Germany carried out its largest medical exercises in decades as Russia's threat to Europe increases the possibility of a large-scale war. The exercise took place in Lithuania and simulated evacuating wounded soldiers from the country and transporting them to hospitals across Germany. In a worst-case scenario of full-scale war, experts believe the system could face up to 1,000 casualties a day. Meanwhile, new drone-related injuries and attacks on medics add further risks. By performing this exercise, the Army can identify gaps in the plan and prepare for the real deal. These gaps have already been detected. A report from the German Hospital Association last year concluded that hospitals are poorly equipped for a crisis such as a NATO alliance or defense emergency. The full-scale training exercise is designed to be as realistic as possible. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the security situation in Europe has become less secure. In response to the heightened situation, Germany has deployed permanent troops abroad for the first time since World War II. According to DW, Lithuania's forces tripled from 500 to 1,800 this year and is expected to reach 4,800 by 2027. And the prospect for a large-scale war is not being taken lightly by Europe. General Brewer, head of Germany's armed forces, spoke to the BBC last week, and he said, "I've never experienced a situation which is as dangerous, as urgent as it is today." So what we are seeing, what we are facing, is a threat from Russia. We can clearly see that Russia is building up its military to a strength which is nearly double the size of what they had before the war against Ukraine. In 2029, it will be possible for Russia to conduct a major war against NATO. And as a soldier, I have to say, we have to prepare for this. Meanwhile, more European nations are increasing defense spending and upping military priorities in the wake of Russia's war in Ukraine. Last year, the UK pledged to hit 5% GDP target by 2035, and France is reportedly aiming for 3.5%. Finally, with NATO predicting the possibility of an attack by Russia by 2029, it doesn't have long to prepare and adapt to a modern world war. Fox News is reporting that President Trump called out NATO and several countries for not assisting U.S. forces in the war with Iran. In a sharp rebuke of NATO, Trump called the Intergovernmental Military Alliance of 32 member states a paper tiger. He further criticized Australia, Japan, and South Korea. He said, "We've got 50,000 soldiers in Japan to protect them from North Korea. We have 45,000 soldiers in South Korea to protect us from Kim Jong-un. Japan didn't help us, or Australia didn't help us. South Korea didn't help us. And then you get to NATO. NATO didn't help us. There were some countries that did." He cited help from Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And apparently he's seriously considering quitting NATO. In an exclusive interview with the British Telegraph, Trump described the military alliance again as a paper tiger, and the possibility of a U.S. exit had now gone beyond a review. In other words, a step that appears closer than ever. The president voiced deep frustration that Europe enjoys U.S. protection but refuses to stand with Washington when vital interests are at stake. He said, "We have been there automatically, including Ukraine. Ukraine wasn't our problem. It was a test. And we were there for them. And we would have always been there for them. They weren't there for us." His sharpest criticism was directed at the British Prime Minister, and he didn't mince his words, mocking Britain's military capabilities, saying, "You don't even have a navy. You're too old," and had aircraft carriers that didn't work. All Starmer wants is costly windmills that are driving your energy prices through the roof. Joining the president was Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who made clear that the U.S. would have to reconsider its membership in the alliance once the war with Iran ends. He said, "If NATO is just us defending Europe, but they deny us access to bases when we need them, that is not a good arrangement." According to reports, the Trump administration is now examining a pay-to-play model under which countries that fail to meet funding requirements would be stripped of decision-making power within the alliance. The administration is also considering withdrawing U.S. forces from Germany. While over in Russia, a Russian colonel has issued a 10-day nuclear strike, warning that the time has come. The Kremlin TV warm pundit advocated for switching to nuclear weapons in the conflict and issuing a deadline to Ukraine after which Russia would unleash nuclear bombs. The colonel said that Putin should issue a deadline similar to the one that Trump issued to Iran, except the Russian version involves being ready to unleash nuclear bombs. Not a very good situation for Ukraine, and hopefully Putin does not take his advice.
Every one of these stories today, taken alone, would be significant. Taken together, describes a world that is repositioning for something much larger all at once. Different regions, different tensions, all rising together. The question is no longer if the next phase will arrive. The question is whether anybody is ready for it. Because Jesus told us in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that we would hear of wars and rumors of wars, distress of nations. And that is exactly what we are seeing right now. But I'd love to hear from all of you. What do you guys think about what's going on in these regions? Let me know in the comments. Also, when you have a free moment, come and visit me on my social media pages as well as my website. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, God bless and stay safe.